What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, let's go mailbag at John Middlekauff. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Do it right now. You guys know the drill. We will start with Jonathan. Comment for the pod. The top four teams in point differential right now are Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, and the Green Bay Packers. It's not everything, but it's something. Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, one thing all four teams really have in common, elite offenses, right? Starting with Minnesota up until the Jets game, they have scored on everybody and fast. Detroit, when they're humming, are a juggernaut. And Green Bay, I mean, their team speed, if you put them in a dome, they would be like the greatest show on turf just in terms of speed. Just an incredible amount of speed on offense. And obviously Chicago have kind of gained some swag the last 2 weeks, beating the shit out of Carolina and Jacksonville. And Rome's making plays, DJ's making plays, Keenan Allen's back, Cole Kmet. So you just got really, really explosive offenses. And, you know, Green Bay, jury's still out to me on the defense. Minnesota, elite defensive coordinator. Is their personnel good enough? Detroit, as a lot of Lions fans thought that I overreacted to the Seattle game, did just lose Hutchinson. It's why, to me, Max Crosby and the Lions make a lot of sense. Their general manager, I said this to Colin, their GM was in LA when they made enormous trades like Jalen Ramsey. Would you give up 2 ones for Max Crosby? I think I would. I think I would. And the Bears, to me, the question simply is their coach good enough when they play better teams? And what does Caleb look like when teams can rush him? Because in that game against the Texans, he was sacked 7 times and hit like 100. And I saw a bunch of people like, Middlekauff, you said the Texans blew them out. It was 19-13. I was like, yeah, I watched the game. They fucking got dominated. We all watched. Now, is Caleb better when they play the better teams? For sure, if he's got more confidence going. But when they play these better teams, that's where the Hutchinson loss is huge. Like, yeah, how would Chicago block him? But yeah, man, I just... It's going to be hard for all four teams to make the playoffs. When you look, okay, let's go NFC West. The Niners are going to win the division. Let's go the NFC South. I do think Tampa and Atlanta could both be double-digit win teams. My Saints are in trouble. It's over. And when you look at the East, might just be Washington. You know, well, I guess we'll see when all these teams play each other, but it kind of feels like a one-team division. Be pretty historic if all four teams win it. We've seen 3 teams do it. A couple years ago, Giants, Cowboys, Eagles. The year before, Niners, Cardinals, Rams. Like, it happens. 4? We've definitely had Bengals, Ravens, Steelers. Last year we had Ravens, Browns, Steelers. So I think they're a borderline lock to get 3 unless something catastrophic happens with the quarterbacks. But 4, that'd be pretty nuts. Love the pod. Panthers fan here. It's been tough. It really has. Our organization is a dumpster fire. However, the new regime this year inherited such a bad situation dealing with the leftovers. I feel like not enough credit has been given to Canales and Dan Morgan for what they've been able to put on the field. Not a fan of Bryce, but with Dalton under center right now, I'm just happy to see the offense score some points. Bar's low. Especially since almost our entire starting defense is injured. With that said, we have a long way to go. But going from not being able to barely score 10 points to consistently putting up 20 points over the last several weeks has been encouraging. What are your thoughts? I think the best case scenario for you is just lose every game. And like you say, just 21-34, 28-40. Just lose games, go, hey, our defense is injured. Our offense with Andy Dalton is suitable. We got some young pieces. And just use your draft capital to try to improve. And obviously this offseason. And decide with Bryce, who to me is probably done. I would just move on. But I hate to say this. I'm not trying to be negative, but I don't think there's much you can take away from this season in terms of because Andy Dalton's not going to be your longtime quarterback. Should the Lions go after Reddick? Well, when I think of the Detroit Lions, I do not think of Haason Reddick. So to me, part of making an acquisition, if you're the Lions, if you're going to get aggressive, is about getting the right type guy. And to me, Reddick, who was just fired by his agents, has had one of the worst business decisions in the history of America. It's like, wait, I got $14 million just sitting here for you. Just sitting here. He's like, nah, man, I'm good. Like, I should be making 25. Like, well, I got 14 right here. And if you have a good season, you can make 20 plus next year while making the 14 this year. He's like, nah, I'm good, bro. I'm good. Probably one of the worst business decisions since Sophia with an F left Call Her Daddy and left, I don't know, 50 million easily on the table over the last 6-7 years. Question for the mailbag. What's up with the NFC North? Obviously, they'll start beating each other up once conference play really gets into swing. But any chance the way the rest of the NFC plays out that they can get 3 teams in the playoffs? Also, Jordan Love MVP this season is shaping up now. He was really good. He was really, really good. I forget who tweeted this, former NFL quarterback, who like Sunday night said, this is the first game that I thought he kind of looked like the guy last year. And he was just kind of moving and grooving, man. When he's on, and listen, Colin said this, he definitely has more Favre than Rodgers. Now, like Rodgers, throwing off the back foot, fundamentals all over the map, but he will just throw it into triple coverage, he's a very, very enjoyable player to watch. I don't think you guys realize as Packer fans how lucky, like, you went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to this. Think of that graphic that the Cleveland Browns went through of like their 700 quarterbacks since 1999 or whatever. And you've just done that. You're the Pittsburgh Steelers of quarterbacks. They've had 3 coaches in 50 years. You've had 3 quarterbacks in well over 30. I think they're a borderline lock right now, like I said, to get 3 teams in. So even in a win, Sirianni somehow finds a way to embarrass himself. I think my Siri's going. By yelling at the home crowd, who probably was heckling him the entire game because they were in a close game with the Browns. Honestly, it's embarrassing because no other head coaches are yelling at their fans like that. True. Like, good job, Nick. You're putting your hand to your ear to your own fan base like you made a major statement while beating a team by 4, when in reality you probably should have beaten them by double digits. What a joke. Embarrassing moment for him, for sure. The roller coaster of an NFL season is moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns. At DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Running it from the 1 or an 80-yard bomb. We don't care how they score touchdowns. We want to bet on them. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. Hey, John, I love the NFL and love watching my team every Sunday, but there's something about college football I love and enjoy watching even more. I know you love and watch football as well. Would you ever consider doing a college football instant reaction like you do for the NFL? Like, after most of the Saturday games are done, you hop on for 30 minutes and talk about the big ones. Number 2, I know you're a Fresno guy, so I'm interested to hear your take because I'm from Idaho and a big Boise State fan. What do you think of the Mountain West this year? Do you think Boise can get a playoff bid? I think UNLV has a shot to knock off Boise. and hose their chances. But I looked at the box score on Saturday, and what's his name? Genty already had like 100 yards and a touchdown. I think UNLV is pretty good. I think the quarterback that they inserted is clearly better than the dude that wanted the money and they booted out. And Boise is good too. So I think UNLV, once they lost to Syracuse, like to me, if there's not a no doubt about it, non-power four team, you shouldn't get a seed. Like you should have to earn it. And UNLV, even if they beat Boise, losing to Syracuse, we'll have to see what Syracuse is. Should you be able to get a bid at 12-1 in the Mountain West? To me, if you run the table, if Boise runs the table, they'll get a bid. If they don't, like they shouldn't get a bid. And then I got no problem with no one getting a bid. Like I'm not going to complain if like, oh, now we get we also get Tennessee makes the playoffs or whoever the extra team is. So I think Boise's really, really good. Saturday, part of from a financial standpoint, it's just kind of a lost cause because for a podcast, the audio version, doesn't get as much traction or just wouldn't on Sundays. So, also to lead a family life and not get a divorce before you even get married, it's probably not on the table right now, but not opposed to it. Uh, yeah, we'll see. Might have to. I also have people that work on the podcast, so it's like it's not even just me. Because most of the time I am home and I easily could do one, but I am dependent on other people that also have families and want to have a fucking life. So luckily, the other 6 days a week pay the bills. But listen, I sometimes got some takes, might as well fire them off. Lincoln Riley, you heard it here first. He's going to the Jags. He doesn't want this college football anymore. He gets Trevor in a place that's college-like and no hostile media. I don't think Shad Khan can hire Lincoln Riley. Clearly his personality is less abrasive than my lips are just dying. Once I went to licking your lips doesn't really work. You got to put chapstick on. Out in the sun for like 6 hours on Saturday. I think they got sunburned. But my thing with Lincoln Riley for the Jags is after going through Urban Meyer, and clearly they're different people, but similar in the sense they've never worked in the NFL. So to hire a guy who's never worked in the NFL, pretty risky. Now, completely different animals here. Urban was a CEO. So he was going to be very dependent on his coordinators. Lincoln is your offensive coordinator. But, hearing Michael Lombardi today rant, like part of fixing Trevor Lawrence, and it's very NBA, everyone's going to be like, hire a guy that can fix him. Where it's like, can we run the team? If the team gets better, he'll be better. Now, maybe he has a ceiling, and he's clearly not as bad as the guy we've seen. He definitely didn't deserve, based on his previous career, $200 million. Doesn't mean he couldn't have become a $200 million guy. But part of what resurrected Jared Goff when McVay got there, team wasn't bad. Right? Gurley was coming into his own. Aaron Donald's a star. They signed Whitworth, and it was like, okay, we're off and running. Then Jared Goff goes to the Lions, and they built a team around him. Hit on some draft picks. St. Brown used the picks from the Rams to get Jamison Williams, took Sewell instead of Jamar Chase, landed some running backs, draft Laporta. And it's like, Jared Goff's a solid player, but if you put Jared Goff on a shitty team, he'll look bad. If you put Jared Goff on a really good team, he'll look good. Right? So if you build a good team around him, their offensive line yesterday was getting smoked. And it's like they signed Gabe Davis. Like, I was probably pretty critical of Trevor Lawrence, I think, on Sunday's podcast. But on the plane with my Starlink, balls were literally going right through guys' hands. It's one thing to have a drop like a Willie Mays catch with a defender draped on you. Those are tough catches, right? It's another thing to be staring at the quarterback open and the ball goes through your hands. That's not Trevor Lawrence's fault. But I do think it's kind of symbolic of just the total operate. They're a bad team. They're a bad team. And ultimately, football is a team game, right? Like Lamar's a great individual player, but he has a fantastic team, right? Patrick Mahomes is a great individual player, but he has a great team. Tom Brady's staying this forever. Like my teams were good. My defense is good. My offensive lines were solid. I had good, solid weapons. It's a team game. You're not going into a fight by yourself. Like you don't need all 53, but you need other good players. And they seem like kind of random. And listen, if you want to crush Balky, he's been terrible. I mean, he's just like, oh, we'll take this guy, we'll take that guy. There's no rhyme or reason to anything. Remember when they drafted ETN in the first round? They started using him at wide receiver. It's like, what's even happening right now? I know Hutchinson shattered his leg yesterday, but it was borderline insane when they drafted the Georgia kid over Hutchinson. And I don't pretend to break down film on the Jags. And clearly the Georgia guy hasn't been terrible. But it was like, you're overthinking this one. Trent's like, I can't do a Trent Baalke, but I get it. You like traits and all that stuff. But what are you doing? Like Aiden Hutchinson is a guy that you rely on as a core player of a great team for 15 years. Obviously, health permitting. If Aiden Hutchinson is healthy, like he's a Hall of Fame player. And it was pretty freaking clear coming out of college. Like, this guy's going to be a really good NFL player. Really good. Is he going to be Lawrence Taylor or Aaron Donald? I don't know. But I don't see how he doesn't make Pro Bowls. Right? And that's where Baalke, like, he's just a weird GM that way. Is it just me, or do we feel like we're headed toward Ravens Chiefs Part 2? I feel like there are only two teams that are truly separating themselves in the powerhouse in the AFC. I actually think the Ravens, in a weird way, could be better suited this year to take on the Chiefs, even though their defense is worse, right? Their pass defense is not good right now. But it's like, that's kind of the Chiefs, not really their thing. But they can really run the ball. And that mistake they made last year, not sticking to the run against the Chiefs. Obviously, Mahomes came out the gates firing, but it's not like they scored 28 points. So, yeah, in a weird way, I'm already talking myself into the Ravens again, because this is what Lamar does to you. You're just watching him. You're like, God, he's so calm and collected. The reason I'm hard on Lamar in my argument of him and Josh, of like, at this point in time, it's like NBA players. Once you get to a certain point in time, like, there's nothing Joel Embiid can do in a regular season game. It's like, oh, damn, that's cool. It's like, yeah, we've seen it a million times. James Harden did this. And I would rather have Lamar than both those two guys, all things being, like, if they were all in playing in the same sport. But my point is, like, I expect Lamar just to be incredible. And you watch him, you're like, this guy's by far the best dual threat quarterback of all time. Because when Steve Young really became the MVP quarterback, he was a pocket passer who ran a little bit. Like, Lamar still is a true dual threat. And he is awesome. Like, I think sometimes people think I'm a hater. I'm not. But I am emotionally scarred. I've bet on him actually multiple times in the playoffs. And it was bad. It was bad. And that's where Josh has been, like, his regular season version that has been awesome over the last, 4 or 5 years. He's played like that in the playoffs. Now, you can argue they both lost, but he's been better. Like, he hasn't been the reason. The reason the Ravens lost last year was Lamar and the offensive coordinator. And now you bring in Derrick Henry, and I'm already at the point where clearly the Ravens are better than the Steelers. Like, even Steeler fans have to acknowledge this, right? Like, your team, you're probably going to end up in the playoffs this year and end up winning 10 or 11 games. But it's a little smoke and mirrors. Like, can you win? Like, listen, I question, like, can Lamar just play like he does in the regular season in the playoffs? Because if he does, they'll win and probably win the Super Bowl. But we all know, and even Steeler fans, you guys will acknowledge this too, because you've seen Ben in his prime, if you're just older than like 20, what the way Justin Fields is playing, which is better than Chicago, ain't going to work in the playoffs. Can we all acknowledge that? It will not work. It's impossible to just throw for like 140 yards and run around a little bit. Can work against the shitty Raiders. He can run for a couple touchdowns. But that will not win you playoff games against the Chiefs, against the Ravens. We're all in the same. You won't beat Harbaugh doing that. If Justin Herbert is healthy, you're not beating Harbaugh in a playoff game. You beat him in the regular season, I get it. Justin Herbert started limping around. I think they might have beat you in that game. But, and then the question is, if you're the Steelers, does trading for another wide receiver make you that much better? Can Fields get on the ball? I don't know. Defense is good. Question for the pod. I commented on your show before the season thinking the Raiders might be a sleeper team. All caps. Boy, was I wrong. It's clear, at best, 4 or 5 wins. Although they are really good individual players at certain spots and a good rookie class, with Brady being a minority owner and assuming he'll have influence, if you were Brady, what would you advise Mark Davis and Telesco to do? Fire AP, go after Ben Johnson or Kubiak type head coach and draft a quarterback? Or still draft a quarterback and give AP more time? To me, AP looks completely lost and is over his head. I actually had a thought because on Tuesday, Tom Brady is supposed to be given the thumbs up to officially become a minority owner for the Raiders. And I had a topic that I wanted to discuss regarding similar things that you're asking. So I will get to this on Wednesday's show in terms of Tom Brady, Mark Davis, and I don't want to say a light at the end of the tunnel, but just I have some thoughts on that situation. Obviously, Antonio Pierce doesn't look like he knows what he's doing. One thing I was told by someone is that, I think this offseason, once he got the job, he started feeling himself a little bit, and I think it's turned some players the wrong way. I think the one thing they got is Devontae. I haven't heard he doesn't even want to leave necessarily, but it's just gotten weird. Obviously, Max Crosby takes a lot of pride in the Raiders, but it is a waste of your career when you're a high-level player and you just lose. Not just lose every year, like have no shot. So we'll get into all that. I don't think Antonio Pierce is going anywhere for a minute, but we'll talk about that soon. I'm always curious about trends in the NFL. One interesting thing I've seen this year from good defenses is the ability to play big. 3 off-the-ball linebackers. Example, the Chiefs, Bolton, Chanel, and Tranquil to stop the run, and have great cover corners on the outside who can man up. I feel like the trend for the last decade has been to sacrifice size on defense for speed. Well, you're not wrong. Obviously, part of that is because these offenses spread it out. So you don't have a choice. You have to change and adapt. When we talk about building a team, it always starts with quarterback, left tackle, rush end, and corner, rightfully so. But with this revitalization of the running back, do you think we'll see more teams picking off-the-ball linebackers who can play big and have speed higher in the draft? Usually those guys don't go until the second day. I feel like if you're average on the back end, you can still win games, Detroit. But if you can't stop a nosebleed on the ground, Dallas, you have no shot. Nerdy question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as a former scout. Well, you can only draft what comes in. So if you just look at college, I bet if we went to Ohio State, Texas, we just went through the top 10 teams, right? Or top 25 teams. Most of the best linebackers, this is an educated guess, I don't have their rosters in front of me, are not 250-pound guys. So the sport changed because of the changing of the offenses. So the type linebackers that came into the league are more likely to be 225 to 230, low 230s that can really run. Now, the knock on that historically is like, well, if you run a smash mouth offense, how can that guy shed a guard or a tackle or even a center? And it's difficult. And they have to beat him with speed and instincts. But because these running backs now all can catch, I have to have that guy on the field because he's got to be able to run to the flat. So what you're saying of the 3 off-the-ball linebackers, to me, a lot of those guys are kind of hybrid players. The third guy When I was in the NFL and worked in college, it was true like pro style offenses versus a team had a strong side linebacker, a middle linebacker, and a weak side linebacker. And the weak side linebacker was built like basically all the linebackers now. Kind of like Fred Warner would have been a weak side linebacker. Maybe he's big enough now, but in 2002, Fred Warner would have been a weak side linebacker and the best weak side linebacker in the league. And then it kind of changed. Now, if you can find a Patrick Willis, right, or Brian Urlacher, guys that now Urlacher was smaller when he came in the league, and clearly was bigger in his prime, but guys that weigh 245, 250, 255 pounds that can run like that, it's a no-brainer. But they don't really exist. So I see a lot of teams still having two linebackers, but their safety, the 49ers had Hufanga. The Ravens have fucking Kyle Hamilton, who looks like a Hall of Famer. Well, they become like these hybrid linebackers because they're great run players because they're so unafraid, so physical at the line of scrimmage. And your defensive looks can change because that guy can cover and he can play the run. The other thing is your corners now, especially your nickel corner, which are going to be a nickel whatever, I don't know, 70% of the time. I haven't seen the stats this year, but I think over the last like 4 or 5 years, it went from like 50-50 to like closer to like 80%. Maybe it's 75%. That guy has to tackle. Because if he will not tackle, a good offensive coordinator will call runs at him all day long. Because if you put him on the field and it's clearly a passing look and your safeties are playing back, like that guy has to be a run defender. So I think it's more about having guys that can be versatile because the versatility on offense is not going to change. I mean, at watching Texas play offense, they got running backs who can catch and run inside the tackles, outside the tackles. It's like those guys are NFL guys. And then they got countless wide receivers who can take tunnel screens to the house, who can jump balls. So it's like all these players at all these top schools. Ohio State's got a ton of skill guys. I mean, the freshman wide receiver, the running backs, those guys can do so much. I need hybrid defensive players. The other thing you said is when you have cover corners, well, how many teams have good cover corners? Most teams have like one. The best, the Chiefs are somewhat of an outlier. They got a bunch of good DBs. And that's what makes them unique is McDuffie can kind of be this hybrid Charles Woodson player. So I think when you're talking about the best defenses, do you have hybrid Swiss Army knives? And McDuffie's a Swiss Army knife. Kyle Hamilton's a Swiss Army knife. Hufanga, when he's healthy for the Niners, is a Swiss Army knife because he can turn into a linebacker. So those guys tackle. That's what made Richard Sherman such a great corner, is he was a great zone defender, but he could tackle like a linebacker. So you couldn't run to his side because he would come in and fill. And you would never run a sweep or an outside look to him because he's such a great, he turns into like a safety / small linebacker. And so to me, the key is just finding guys like the knock when I was in the NFL and just young kind of run around linebackers is they liked hitting in space, but they didn't like, I would say the clutter that is presented between the tackles and they get lost in the shuffle. And I think these guys have gotten so used to kind of, running around them. Now, if a top tackle, if Sewell or Trent Williams or whoever, Tristan Wirfs gets their hands on most of these linebackers, they fucking destroy them. Where if you go back to like when I was a kid, you'd have one-on-one, those guys just coming full speed down. And unless you were like Larry Allen, there would just be huge collisions with guards and centers and even tackles. And sometimes they'd win, sometimes they'd lose. Now, like, it's really a lot of running around them, which I would do the same if I was a smaller linebacker. Heard you with Colin. You said you were at an OU fan. What do you think of Venables staying with Hawkins instead of throwing Arnold in for the Red River rivalry game? Do you think Arnold has told him he's hitting the portal regardless of this year, and Venables keeping it out of the media? I'm not saying Arnold is better or worse, but I wonder why they didn't even throw him in at all. I don't know this for a fact, but clearly he's going to transfer, right? Now, I don't know if he's already told them, don't put me in the game, which would be weird because during warmups, he's playing catch with Hawkins. The reason they're just running with Hawkins is their wide receivers suck. The top 5 guys are injured. So they're rolling out guys that they would never play. So the only element that they have on offense is running the quarterback around, which Texas is so good on defense. I heard someone say they're averaging like their opponents are averaging like 6 or 7 points. Their Texas defensive speed is pretty eye opening, which Sark needs, right? If he gets a good defense, their offense is so good they can win a natty. That was their what was their downfall last year? Defense. DeBoer and Penix and those boys lit them up like Christmas tree. Well, it's going to be a lot more difficult this year, and we know Texas can score. So Hawkins kind of gives them a running element, and I think that's why. And you know what's funny is you watch Hawkins in warmups, and he was throwing some of these passes, and you're just like, this guy's throwing bullets. Now he doesn't really know where the ball's going, but I get true freshman rolling with him. Uh, like all these guys come in different shapes and sizes. Seeing Arnold, who was the fourth quarterback in his class behind Arch, Nico, and the dude that got beat out of Boise State that came from USC. Like you see Arch standing there, he's even Mario's like, God, he's big. I'm like, well, yeah, he's a man. He's like 6'5". He's huge, bigger than yours. And you see Arnold, who's probably more like I would say looks more like Derek Carr type, Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm talking body type, but doesn't have the movement Hawkins, who is much closer to the I don't even know what he's like a poor man's Kyler. Obviously, Kyler's much better at everything, but like that's kind of what his mold's going to be: run around, make big plays, throw bombs. He's got a big arm, and you're just going to have to coach him up. And the better players he plays with, the better he's going to be. I think it's very, very complicated with this transfer portal. Arnold could not pass and couldn't stop turning the ball over. So you make the move, and once you make the move, all these guys get like butt hurt and they go, well, I'm out because they can. And I think once you say that, you just kind of honor it. And maybe cut him off the NIL. I don't know exactly how it works, but at least where I was sitting, it looked like he was the backup quarterback for that game. So if he's the backup quarterback, he's just trying to be a good. I don't know. These situations are complicated. I would have done what they did. I just roll with this kid. It's going to be a tough year. You try to get to like 8 wins, and then next year your offense is way better because they are good on defense. I mean, it was 7-3 with like 5 minutes to go in the first half. They'd already picked off Ewers, and then they fumbled twice, and Texas turned in at 21 points. So Stafford was on Fox this past Sunday. Looks like he's might be coming in for a tryout. Think this is the last season we see Stafford and see him on Fox next year. Similar to how Kelsey went on Amazon. I think this one's probably a little different. He lives in LA, so it's easy for him. Stafford, I think his good friend is now dating Carissa. Carissa's very close with his Stafford's wife, Kelly. Inevitably, could he be calling games in 5 years? For sure. But even if he is, and Fox would hire him in a heartbeat, and he'd be fun. Like I'd hire him too if I were them. But it doesn't pay what he's making right now, $35-40 million. So even if it's a good salary, like, hey, we'll give you a couple $1 million to call games. Like Greg Olson's making $3 million. Would you rather make $3 million or make 40 playing quarterback? So to me, Stafford feels like the type guy. Now he's got a young family, a bunch of kids. Maybe he just calls it quits a little earlier than you think. So I didn't get that impression like, oh, he's doing this to transition next year. Remember, Greg Olson called games while he was playing. Like in the bye week, would call a game. And I think he still played a couple years. And it wasn't until maybe he was like, God, my body doesn't feel good. I'm not as good of a player. I'm out. But if you're Stafford, you're like, shit, if we didn't have so many injuries, my team would be awesome because I'm still good. He's not wrong. So if I was guessing, uneducated guess, I think Matt Stafford is playing football next year. If he's healthy. This is a comment. Totally agree with Patricia on the coach pod. He still seems enthralled to Bill and is stopping him from opinioning properly and expressing his views. That's what we want from him and every ex-coach on the media. I agree. No one's judging. When I turn on to watch you, obviously I'm more inclined to watch Bill Belichick because he's Bill Belichick and won 6 rings. But like, if you're a former coach and you're talented on television and interesting and willing to say some shit, like, you're going to be entertaining. And Bill actually is kind of like, he's willing to kind of throw some blows. But I think sometimes he looks over at Patricia, who's terrified to offend anybody. And Bill's like, yeah, I'm going to coach. And he kind of pulls in the reins. Or if you just got Bill and Lombardi, I think there'd be episodes where they would just empty the clip. Because again, I've had people in the NFL get mad at me. Like, man, that was fucked up what you said. No, we're all saying the same things. I just put my name on literally everything I say. Right? So, like, who knows what Bill is saying when the mic's not on him? That's what we want. Now, we're not going to get it all. But if we can just get 20, 30, 40% of it, like, it's going to be fantastic television or YouTube. Right? So, that's all I want as someone that's a consumer of this stuff. Entertainment, baby. Just entertain me and throw some blows. Talk how you normally talk. Just talk how you normally talk. Like, when I watch Patricia talking, I don't believe he normally talks. I believe you take the mic off him, get him behind. He's saying a bunch of shit. And he's unwilling to say it. So if you're unwilling to say it, take the fucking mic off. You're not, no one wants to hear from you. At least Bill's earned, like, I get it. He's going to be a head coach next year, so he can't eviscerate everybody. But he's gotten way closer to the line on some stuff than I ever thought he would. So I appreciate that.